Hello, everybody. Welcome to this LinkedIn Live, our final one of the year. And this one, I normally have one guest, sometimes I have two, but I've got three today, which is fantastic. And we're going to share with you our selection of books that we'd recommend if you're not sure what to buy that loved one in your life, or somebody that's looking for some help with their career or their positivity or their productivity. So let's get everybody introducing themselves first of all. So Chris, perhaps I could get you to introduce yourself to everyone, if you would, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and obviously great to be here today. Got a lot to share. So my name's Chris Thorne. I'm an executive and career coach and trainer for 1080, and I mainly work with people going through really the whole life cycle of career transition, from the outplacement through finding the role, and especially love to coach leaders into that next level of leadership. And the books I'm going to recommend today have been topics that have come up again and again in my coaching sessions.
Fantastic. Russ, well, I'm working that way around my my leaderboard, so to speak. So you're next, if you would.
Yeah, no. Hi everyone. My name is Russ Hartland-Shaw. I'm a leadership coach and facilitator for 1080. And yeah, similar what Chris said, basically, but much the same. I'm excited to share the books with everybody today, because they're two that I suppose for me have had like a really lasting impact. So I've talked to lots of people about them.
Brilliant, thank you. And last but not least, Cherie, on your first LinkedIn Live with us as well. So welcome.
Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Cherie Schaefer. This year I've just stepped down and semi-retired from a 30-year career in human resources. I'm now a business and executive coach with 1080, and I'm also a non-executive director for some non-profits, including Keele University and a couple in Manchester where I live. And my books are focused around time and productivity, probably on the back of a career of not enough hours in the day. So that's where I'm today.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, everyone. So for those that are watching or live or watching on our YouTube channel at a later date, we will share all the book titles in the LinkedIn comments. But to kick us off, let's go with, now Russ, I know this book's been really, you mentioned you've spoken to a lot of people about both of your books, but I think this one really hit the mark with you, didn't it?
Massively so, yeah. I think this book should be mandated for anybody that's got children and anyone that ever speaks to another human being. That's I would go as far as to say that, like, it really is a brilliant book. And least of all, the brilliant thing about this book is it's easy to read, and it's quite, and I mean, it touches on some dark topics, but it's a really pleasant to read, and it's easy to read because it's basically one big conversation between Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry. So both of my books have a slight theme in as much as they sort of touch on the subject of trauma, which is something that's very close to my heart. And I became a leadership coach first, and a parent to a child with early childhood trauma second. And one of the things I noticed was there were some direct links and some correlations between what I was talking about and what was showing up in my coaching sessions versus dealing with a child and parenting the child with trauma. So that's why a lot of the work that I do now sort of centers around that. But I also think it spans across both catches. I think if you can approach the world through a trauma lens, then the world becomes a lot easier for everybody concerned, really. So the brilliant thing about what happened to you is the whole purpose of it, why it's got the name that it's got, is it's the idea of reframing the age-old phrase that we all say under our breath when someone annoys us or someone does something that's slightly out of the ordinary, with what's wrong with you, what's the matter with you, reframing that phrase to what's happened to you. So the idea being that all of our early lived experiences and also anything that's happened to us affects our behavior. And obviously we talk a lot about neuroscience in this field, but it really is understanding how the brain works and understanding what's happened to you, which then shows up in our behaviors. And actually from a trauma perspective, that's really significant for children. It's really significant for anybody with PTSD, but actually it shows up day to day in our lives, whether we're talking about, why somebody is behaving how they're behaving is as a result of potentially what has happened. So it's a fantastic book, and it touches on all sorts of different subjects, but fundamentally what I think is brilliant about it is it's just this one big conversation. And I haven't actually listened to the audiobook personally, but when I've recommended this to other people, one of the things, I don't know about you guys, but when you're sort of recommending books to coachees, often you can't make the assumption that somebody's a reader necessarily and has the time to actually read the book. But what I'll always do is talk about the audio version. And I recommended this as an audio version or as a book, and then somebody said they downloaded it as an audio version. They said it was absolutely brilliant as an audio book because it's actually just one big conversation, so it makes it very, very easy to listen to. So yeah, I think it's a brilliant title for anybody that wants to read something a bit different. If anyone wants to explore human behavior, trying to sort of understand people's the nuances that show up at work, I think I would recommend it to anybody.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think what came through when we were talking before the session on that one is I didn't think it was probably a book that would really appeal to me that much. And then the more you were talking about it, the more I thought, actually, that sounds really interesting. And sometimes we overlook these things, don't we?
Do you know what I think? That so we talked about like what's the key takeaway with this book for me, and it's that point really, is that I think all it does is it highlights that just how common trauma is actually, and how we're all walking around with some sort of unresolved trauma. And that isn't me being flippant on anybody that's experienced significant trauma, but I think the point is that whatever the trauma might be, the impact, there's no scale that's directly linked to the severity of the trauma versus how you respond to it. And that's what this book pulls out. And the fact that it sort of shows up all the time in the workplace, it's just extraordinary. And also, I suppose, the other takeaway for this, for me, is how profound the impact can be when we just change our responses slightly and just try and see things through a slightly more empathetic way. And I think we're all a bit guilty of that because the world happens and the day job happens, and you can sit there and think, I'm going to be more empathetic today, but then ultimately you are only human. But this book pulls that out really nicely.
Brilliant, thank you. So, Chris, the first book that we've got for yourself is this one, Think Faster, Talk Smarter. My wife often tells me I need to talk slower, and she definitely says I need to talk smarter. So tell us what this one's all about, if you would.
Yeah, of course. So the reason I chose this was I was increasingly seeing a lot of my clients coming to me, and one of the key skills they needed help with was their communication. And interestingly, I discovered some research earlier this year when I was putting together a webinar that found that one of the number one factors that helps us in our career success is our ability to communicate, get along with other people, and communicate well. This was 15 years of research by Professor Allison Woods from Harvard Business School. So I think that's a fairly credible source. So as I started digging into, well, how can I help these people? How can we come up with some ways that they can both calm the nerves in some of these scenarios, and also how can we just organize their thoughts so they didn't ramble and go off in a lot of different directions. And that's where I came across this book. And what I love about it is initially he starts off by addressing that whole mindset piece around how we think about these situations where we're asked to think on our feet, or how can we, just calm our response. So a bit like what Russ is saying in terms of choosing how we want to respond or how do we want to frame a particular situation, and gives us some very practical ways of doing that from a physiological standpoint, which I thought was very helpful. A lot of them I'd seen before. One I thought was quite interesting was if you tend to be someone who gets a bit warm and sweaty, if you're talking, hold the cold bottle of water in your hands, which I thought, oh, I'd never heard that one. So I heard a lot of the other ones around reframing nerves to excitement and a few things like that. But where I think it really shines then is that he goes on and he gives you frameworks. So a bit like when we're doing the STAR framework to do interview answers, he gives you frameworks you can use for things like small talk, giving a toast, giving a pitch, giving feedback, answering questions in meetings. And I started sharing these with some of the people that I was coaching. And what was so exciting was to see their confidence in having, firstly, some ways to just calm themselves down, but then secondly, actually having a way to structure their thoughts so they didn't go all over the place. And I'll just share one of the frameworks that is particularly useful. It's very simple. It's what, so what, and now what. So what is your point? What's happening? So what, why is this significant, or why does it matter? And then the now what is, well, what do we need to do next, or what action is needed? And it just helps people to, a bit like the STAR technique, just kind of grab your thoughts and kind of keep on track, not ramble, come across more confidently and more clearly, because there is something about being able to go into a situation with other people and communicate your ideas and feel like you're being heard and respected and understood, and that your confidence just skyrockets. So it's definitely a book I would say as a good starting point to address both the nerves and then also just some really practical ways that you can think through some things. It is about being intentional before you have some of those conversations, but I think even just having a few frameworks in your head, if you're put on the spot, that you can go, right, okay, what, no, what, so what, now what, and just keep yourself on track. I think that'll make a huge difference in anyone's career, because everybody needs to deal with people. And I think the more we can have just a few of these little tips and hints up our sleeve to fuel that confidence, then the better.
Brilliant. As somebody that does some career coaching as well as executive coaching as well, I think the more sort of little frameworks and things like that, especially on helping people to calm their nerves, interview stage and things like that, are really, really useful. What I hadn't realized when I was putting this LinkedIn live session together was how much it was going to cost me on Amazon, because I'm in danger of probably buying all the books.
I know. I feel like
on Audible if you have a subscription, or Spotify if you've got Spotify Premium, you can listen to it as an audiobook as well.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking about shares in Amazon, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So third one. Now, I read this book years ago, and I must admit the title of it, I remember that bit, but I don't remember that much about the rest of the book. So, Cherie, Eat That Frog, Brian Tracy. What was your thoughts behind choosing that one?
Well, you're right. This one's been knocking around for a while. I think it's about 10 years old. But when I did mention it in our setup session, you were all very fond of this book. And this book's helped me enormously over the years. It's a book about time management, productivity, and it's about developing positive habits. So he deals with 21 ways to get more done, which is very appealing in itself. But what I like about it is it's a quick, easy read. It's 117 pages long. And when you're strapped for time, the last thing you want to do is be plowing through 500 pages. So he makes it really easy. It's a fun read. And you can take away, I took a couple of things away from it that I've applied ever since, but it's like any self-help book. You take the bits that are of use to you and you just park the others for later. And it's a book that actually you probably should revisit, because different things will probably resonate with you at different times. But he covers everything from goal setting, planning, results, work-life balance, the Holy Grail. And I'll just give you a quick snippet around the frog, and which deals with the frog in the title. What he says is, if there's 10 items on your to-do list, 1 or 2 of them are going to be worth 5 to 10 times more than the others. But they're usually the ones where we procrastinate, we pick them up, we put them down, we think about them all day. So they're on our mind all day. We're expending time and energy on them, but we're not actually getting them done. We get distracted, which deals with my other book later on. And basically, these 2 big impactful tasks, they're your frogs. And his advice is you eat those first. It's the first thing you do. That they're the top of your to-do list, and you pick them up, you do them, you carry on until they're completed, and you have eaten your frog for the day. And we apply this in my household. I've given this book to so many people, so many coaches, recommended it to so many people. We have we talk in our house of, I'm just going to go deal with a frog, or I've eaten a frog today. And you feel epic once you've got that frog out of the way, and it just clears your mind, clears your day, you know, for the rest of your day. And he says, just save the procrastination for the low value activities. Don't procrastinate on something big and impactful, or even better, just delegate and get rid of those altogether. So it's really stayed with me, this book. I think I probably will revisit because there's 21 other tips in there as well. But it's a fun read, but it's very practical and very useful, and I love this book.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's definitely one I'm going to have to revisit. And I think in workshops I deliver, if we get onto the subject of time task management, the frog always comes up, because, you know, that whole thing, as you say, of, you know, by ignoring the frog, it actually means you're not giving 100% to the other things that you're doing, because part of your brain is still thinking about that big ugly frog that you've got to eat. So yeah.
Do you know, I'm also wondering with that book whether that's a good stocking filler for somebody that's starting out on their career.
Yeah.
Try and get their head around that whole kind of absolutely mesmerizing experience of starting out in work. And if you start with some of those 21 habits, that would be a really good thing to potentially.
I wish I'd have read it earlier in my career.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
If sales of Eat That Frog go up, I'm expecting Brian to message us to say thank you, because I think you're right as well, Russ, because of it being, as you say, 117, I think it was. Yeah, 117 pages. It's an easy, quick read as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
But as I recall, you can kind of dip in and out of it as well. So it's like you can take the specific chapters or pieces of it, and it's, you know, and as I remember right, it's, you know, it's very, the font's space wide. It's very quick and easy to skim and actionable, and you can pull out those pieces. And it's a great reminder, because like work-life balance is another topic that comes up quite a lot in some of my conversations. So it's always good to be able to pull out a few of these principles as well, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, now the next one does sound very, very serious. Mr. Hartland Shaw, I believe this is one of yours.
Yes.
The body. I love the title of it.
It's great, isn't it?
It's, you know, the body keeps the score. It just talks to you, doesn't it?
It does, and it makes you think, oh, okay, what's this all about? It's won all sorts of awards, this book, for good reason. Now, if I'm being absolutely honest, it's not a read that you can just sit and go like cover to cover. I didn't find it an easy read to just go all the way through. So it's not a page turner, but it's a really, really powerful book to understand once the concepts behind it. And that's just a personal thing from my perspective. I found that I picked it up and put it down and read a bit here and there. But what is brilliant about this is that, I don't know, there's so much to take away from this book, really. But the key thing is about the idea that the answer to our mental health crisis is not necessarily through modern science and medication. Is one of the big things that comes from this book. And it talks very similar about the other books that I've talked about, and, you know, neuroscience generally, this great understanding, it's a good foundation for understanding that. But what it does is it highlights the fact that we have walked away from all of the more holistic approaches to mental health and actually talking about society more generally, and how we've never been less of a community than we've ever been right now in the 21st century. And actually what this book is suggesting is the idea of community is where our problems are shared, where our problems are halved as a result, and all of the power of the mind and the body and meditation and mindfulness and all of those. He talks very, very coherently about all these ancient practices and just how brilliant they might be. And actually what this book did for me was it calmed me quite significantly, because I was really concerned about the whole neurodiversity nature of children and the fact that everyone just wants to medicate. But actually there's a bit of a dark edge to that with medicating mental health medication. And this kind of turns that on its head slightly. It's not discounting medication. It's just saying that there are other ways to potentially help, which I think is probably one of my big takeaways from it. It talks about all sorts of different things. I mean, the idea that we're not evolving at a rate that we are able to keep up with what's going on with modern technology, for example. The fact that we have lost the art of, as I mentioned before, about community, but this idea of collective singing in a church, and actually the restorative practice of that is so significant that we've walked away. And actually the most worrying thing is that he talks about is that we've actually replaced all that with social media, which is really quite alarming. So it's a brilliant book if you are wanting to sort of explore other avenues about and trying to get a sense of sort of what's going on in society really today. I mean, I could talk all day about it, but again, the point is with this is that it's the idea the body keeps the score. The body remembers ultimately what's going on, and it remembers its early lived experiences. And you have to obviously, you can't just hide away from that. And actually, the modern medication just sort of puts a sticking plaster over it. And there are so many other ways that you can intervene.
Well, it just masks it, doesn't it? And
it's a mask. And I want to make the point that it's not a book that is raging against the establishment and raging against the fact that you can have alternative routes to mental health. Generally, it's just saying that there are other ways around it. And also, I think the good thing about this is if you're sat there thinking, why is going on? There are lots of small steps you can take, and if you see that in other people, that you can sort of act upon straight away to try and ease things slightly, and rather than just thinking that that the only route is medication. So it's a fantastic book.
It doesn't have to be the default, and I think from our conversations about the book is it's almost like my inference from it is the body keeps the score. The body can't unlearn what it's built up as an experience, and if you're just masking it, you're not allowing healing either, are you?
Oh, and I think that's the point. It's the healing that you've got to, it keeps the score, but the scar is always there. But you're able to sort of move on, whereas medication is just a way potentially of just sort of masking the issue. The other thing that I didn't mention before that this book touches on is just how important a relationship is and how important psychological safety is in order to create conditions to be able to heal. Again, I'm conscious that it's all sort of very sort of trauma-led, but that shows up in the workplace as well. When you think about, I had a situation this week where somebody had to dismiss another person, and thankfully we'd had the coaching session beforehand, because what we did was thought about ways of creating a psychological safety between both the person doing the dismissing and the person being dismissed. And I caught up with them afterwards, and they talked about the fact that they actually ended with a hug, which is not your typical sort of output of those types of meetings. But my coachee did cite the fact that our conversation helped around this idea of seeing it from somebody else's perspective, and actually acknowledging the person doing the dismissing, my coachee, was also freaking out slightly about it and feeling terrible about it, and just sort of noticing those feelings. And that's what this book's really good at. And it was all about the relationship that made that happen relatively straightforward.
Brilliant. Thank you. Chris, we are back to you with Never Split the Difference.
That's quite a deep topic, what you've just been talking about, Russ. And I think it ties in that, the more we understand about how we react as human beings, psychologically and physically and everything else, I think the more effective we can be in these situations. And I guess that's part of the reason this next book has appealed to me. I've followed the work of this Chris Voss for quite a while. I've never actually read the book, but I'd heard about him. And increasingly what I was finding this year was that I was having coaching sessions where I was either being asked to help clients negotiate a job offer, or I had leaders who were needing to influence people to persuade them and to make certain decisions, rellaborate on things. Or in a lot of cases, I had people who needed to influence but without authority. So that was also another wrinkle. And so I read the book and I loved it. It's a brilliant book because Chris Voss was a former international FBI hostage negotiator. So the way he takes you through the different techniques in the book is by taking you through the different scenarios where he shows you how he's applied it. It's almost like a case study approach. And so there's a lot of great takeaways here in terms of really understanding what influences people, what makes people tick, what goes through our minds when we're in some of these different scenarios. And whether you're having to negotiate something or not, hopefully not a hostage situation, but even just needing to influence people, understanding some of these, I guess I'll call them principles or techniques, can be incredibly useful. So things like, starting with empathy, which I know we've talked about, or labeling, sort of calling out what's not being said in the room. I can sense that perhaps time is an issue here, or, summarizing back what someone has said to them in a way that they're thinking, yes, that's right. A lot of this is about helping people to feel really heard and understood, because only when we feel heard and understood are we going to be receptive to being influenced. And one of the other techniques I particularly love is something he calls calibrated questions, which is where you're asking how and what questions. So when you're trying to reach an agreement on something, rather than making it sound like, this person's being done to, or, something's being imposed upon them, you're shifting people into more of a creative and collaborative problem-solving approach. Just those questions, how and what, they get that part of the brain ticking over and thinking. And I think there's a tremendous amount to learn here in terms of just understanding what, the very simple techniques to take away and apply. And I've had a few clients, put them into practice and come back and say, oh, yes, that worked really well. So that's obviously very exciting to see that. But I think whether we like to think of ourselves as negotiating things, we are always negotiating things in some form or fashion, or collaborating, even with our friends or family or anything. So I think it's a great book just to learn some of those principles, but also, as I say, done in a very interesting way. The stories are really fascinating, some of the cases that he had. So highly, highly encourage you to pick it up if you need to influence, especially with or without authority, or you need to negotiate that next big conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you. I can't believe how much time's flowed away from us. However, we have got time, Cherie, for you to tell us about stolen focus. This sounds very serious indeed.
So continuing,
nothing like eat that frog.
Continuing the theme though, so around productivity. So the subtitle of this book is Stolen Focus: Why You Can't Pay Attention. And my husband took this book on holiday. I didn't fancy it at all, but I ran out of books and picked this one up, and I could not put it down. It's just fascinating. It made me really grumpy reading it, not because of how it's written, but because of some of the subjects that he was tackling in this book. So it's a book for people who are spending too much time on their phones. That's how the Financial Times described it. It's a fascinating look into our minds and how we focus. But what he really deals with is how technology is being developed to steal our attention, and how keep us online, to keep us with the adverts going, and to keep us scrolling. And how much information we're dealing with these days as well. I mean, one of his openers is, each day now, the information we receive is the equivalent to 174 newspapers. That's one of the quotes in the book, which just blows your mind. But also goes some way to explaining why we're exhausted and overloaded with information. It is unputdownable. It's educating, it's entertaining. It tells fantastic stories from Silicon Valley. Another one is, and you don't really think about this, but do you remember the days when the internet, you would look up pages and then the pages would stop? It wasn't infinite scrolling. Infinite scrolling was only developed later. Just the concept of the internet used to stop when you thought it'd given you enough information. And it covers things like that. What it also covers, though, is what we can do about it. So there are some tips and tricks in there of how to make technology work for you, and how you need to understand your tech in order to stop it stealing your attention as well. Fantastic book. Another great Christmas present.
Sounds like a good one for parents.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's on the back of the book cover. It says,
I've just written it down.
Their kids. Yeah.
And it's amazing. We have so much more control over those technologies than we actually think sometimes. I mean, something as simple as turning off notifications for some of these things. It's, and you don't think to do it until somebody points it out to you. Go, oh, actually, yes, I could do that.
And your do not disturb function very underutilized.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Well, thank you for all of those. We're at time, so I'd got a couple in my back burner that I was going to mention, but I'm going to put those into the list that we put online. What I'd ask everybody that's watching as well is when you see the LinkedIn posting, perhaps add some of your own recommendations for us as well, because we're always looking for our next good read. So do add your own comments to the LinkedIn conversation, keep that conversation going. And in the run up to this session, I reached out to all of the associates at 1080, and quite a few people came back and said, I can't, I'd love to come do the session with you, but I can't. Here's my books. So I'm going to add those books into the, so we should get quite a good list. So if anybody's not sure of what to buy somebody for Christmas this year, then hopefully we've given you some ideas. Rush, Cherie, Chris, thank you very, very much for coming and talking to us about your books today. Really do appreciate it a lot. And thank you very much. And we'll end this stream now and continue the conversation on LinkedIn. So
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yeah. Well said. Yes. Merry Christmas. It does feel a little bit strange saying it on the 2nd of December.
I know, but
it's my first one. So Merry Christmas.
Merry
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody. And,
All right.
bye.
Cheers, then.